Let's rip into some issues with Susie O'Brien from the Herald Sun and Stephen Cenatiempo, Radio 2CC breakfast host in Canberra. Thanks for joining us again, both of you. Susie, let's start with you. Parliament back, and it's getting the tax cuts are getting through. We all know that. That's the substance that's come out of today. It's getting very personal between Albo and Dutton, though, isn't it? Albo, the liar in the lodge and all the rest of it.
Oh, I think this is a fascinating debate. And, you know, I guess it depends where you are on the income scale as to whether you support the tax cuts going through or being dropped. But, you know, the thing is, it does come down to a matter of trust. A lot of people trusted that Albanese was going to go ahead with these latest tax cuts, which, of course, were a leftover from Morrison. And the fact that he now has not done so means that he's open to these kind of attacks.
He sure is, and he's fighting back, though. Albo's having a personal attack at Peter Dutton. Have a look at this in Parliament.
And I was reminded that the Leader of the Opposition, his big commitment to be made leader was that he'd smile more. That was going to be like Little Miss Sunshine, Mr Speaker. It was going to be like Little Miss Sunshine.
Members on my right will cease to reject.
Instead, he gave us Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
I'm a big fan of Little Miss Sunshine and Jack Nicholson, Stephen, but Albo's skating on thin ice, right? It all plays up to the gallery, but this breach of trust, as Susie mentioned, this is going to be long-term for him, the repercussions.
No doubt about it, because it's not the first breach of trust. I mean, the reality is that this government has failed to live up to any of its promises, particularly the promise about a different kind of politics. And, you know, you can, my word is my bond, and integrity is going to be the backbone of this government and all that kind of thing. And the reality is that Albo's one of those kind of blokes, and always has been, that if you goad him, you can actually get him on the hook and make him slip up. And I think that's the game they're playing here. But having said that, and I mentioned this last week, I think the coalition has been somewhat wedged here. They have to support these tax cuts. But if they're smart, they can now use this as an opportunity, as a springboard to further tax reform, because the Stage 3 tax cuts, while they were good at addressing bracket creep, they didn't go far enough. And this is an opportunity for Peter Dutton to go back on the front foot and say, well, look, we are the party of better economic management, and we're going to prove it with our next lot of policies.
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear from that interview with Keith Wallahan that that's where the coalition is heading, and that's can only be good for all of us in the long run. Let's talk about Labor, though, again. Last week I talked a lot about this apparent rift between Anthony Albanese and his Treasurer, Jim Chalmers. Some people saying they're not talking to each other. Of course, Jim Chalmers seemed to be as ambitious, wanting Albo's job sometime. Have a listen to Chalmers in Parliament today.
And I want to pay tribute here to the Prime Minister of our country for the way that he leads our cabinet and the way that he leads our country, and most importantly for the way that he delivers for Middle Australia, Mr Speaker, for the way that he puts people before politics, an approach which is absolutely foreign to those opposite.
Laying on a bit thick, isn't he, Susie? Doth he protesteth too much?
Well, I mean, the interplay between those two men is becoming very, very fascinating. And of course, we can't forget that Jim Chalmers wrote his PhD thesis about another Prime Minister, about Paul Keating and all of his delicious lines and his economic policies. So I think he's traditionally been quite underestimated, Jim Chalmers, because he's got that kind of Queensland outback charm. But I think he's got his eye maybe on the top job at some point, and Albanese would be very aware of that.
Apart from the Keating thesis, do you think, Stephen, he might have a Keating knife in his knife block?
It's like when a football club says the coach has the full support of the board. That's what I reckon it is.
Indeed. Now, quickly, I want to go to this great story about local governments, a survey by Council Watch in Victoria, where they've surveyed ratepayers about what their councils are focusing on. And guess what? They want people in the councils and their money, their rates, spent on the core issues. Let's have a look here. What do people want their rates spent on? Upgrading roads, upgrading footpaths and parks, and removing dumped rubbish. What don't they want their rates spent on by their local governments? Climate change, equality, diversity, LGBTQIA+ issues, and Indigenous reconciliation. Whatever you think of any of these issues, Susie, ratepayers are right, aren't they? This has got nothing to do with local government. They should stick to their knitting.
Well, as someone who comes from a household of 7 people whose bin is only collected once a fortnight, I would like my council to please get back to the basics. Roads, rates, rubbish. And, you know, I have no problem with diversity agendas, but when it comes at the expense of the basics, which is what we want from councils, I want my rubbish collected not once a fortnight, but once a week. And I would much prefer that than councils in Victoria who are flying romantic flags, celebrating people who don't have a romantic interest in someone else. Like, get back to basics, guys. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I tell you what, state governments could learn the same lesson, couldn't they, Stephen?
Oh, here. Well, look, when I read this, I said, here, bloody here, because, look, our local council here in Canberra seems to be focused on everything other than the basics. They're every woke cause. Like, one of the Greens come out today, they want to ban fossil fuel advertising inside sporting grounds.
I noticed that,
apparently that's the most important thing, you know.
I heard them saying...
Forget the fact that you can't get into the hospital.
They were saying it'd be great when there's an AFL match or a cricket match in Canberra, they'll have to black out any fossil fuel ads. Yeah. She occurred that they actually won't come to Canberra if they can't wear their uniforms. Honestly, the numpties. 2 quick issues. I'll give each of you a hit on it one at a time. First up, in your hometown there in Melbourne, Susie, today I listened to this unfold on radio. Amazing, this French Spiderman, no harness, no safety net, no ropes, just climbs up this building. Let's listen to what he said when he came down.
Don't know, it chose this building, I don't know, probably because there is a good way to climb. Not too tall, it's not a 300 meter, it's a 180 maybe, something like that. And him is supposed to leave tomorrow. So we'll see if he can, but...
Sorry, that's Lucas, his mate, Susie. Anyway, did it successfully, taken away by police afterwards. As they threw him into the paddy wagon, someone asked him, a journo asked him why he did it. He says, because I can.
Well, you ask me, is there a good way to climb? I say going by lift. I mean, it's funny, this is a 55-storey building. Just around the corner from that, there's Eureka Tower, 108 stories. So, like, he's just playing around the edges. He's not even taking this seriously.
Yeah.
Another 55 floors if he really wants to get serious.
Exactly. If you're going to get in for a penny, in for a pound. Good point. Now, Stephen, just quickly, King Charles III, King of the UK, of course, King of England, cancer diagnosis. Bit of mystery about exactly what the cancer is, but shock news around the world.
Yeah, it really is. And at 75 years old, the treatment's not going to be easy on him. I mean, obviously, he'll get the best medical care available because he's the king. But, you know, sad news indeed. And particularly with one of the other senior royals who's off sick at the moment with the Princess of Wales, it's going to put a lot of pressure back on the Prince of Wales and Edward and Sophie as well. And all I can say is God save the king.
Well, indeed, we want him to recover, but it's a good chance for William and Katie to get out there and do a bit more work, get a bit of practice in, I suppose. But best wishes to the King, King Charles III. Thanks for joining us, Susie and Stephen. We'll catch up with you next week.